Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke, and I'm so glad you're here. If you're just coming in for the very first time, welcome. And if you're back again, thank you so much. Many of you have followed me on my radio show for, my goodness, over 4 decades. And this new platform is doing remarkably well, and I'm so glad that you're here. And once again, I'm going to bring you an amazing guest, and you're going to learn a lot today, because that's what it's all about. It's about learning. It's continuing to increase our knowledge of things that'll keep us healthier, because it really is about getting healthy, being healthy, and staying healthy, but doing it with concrete, honest, and true to form information. And that's what we do here on the Honest Health Podcast. My guest today, Mark Kaylor, longtime friend, industry icon, is here. I want to give you a little background. I think you're going to find this to be a great conversation. While pursuing his doctoral studies in sociology, Mark's life took an abrupt and significant turn. A part-time job in a health food store began a series of life discoveries and career changes, awakening a passion for holistic health and healing. From this point on, he began exploring in depth, and still does to this day, a diverse array of healing practices and traditions from around the world. From a Cherokee reservation to the Amazonian rainforest to the mountains in China, his studies have led him directly to develop a truly holistic practice and approach to health and healing, incorporating many traditions, styles, and modalities. His passion stems from his desire to share with others the vast amount of information and many options that are available to them to find their own path to radiant health. Mark has worked in the natural foods industry for about 4 decades as a leading holistic health educator, formulator, radio show host, and guest and author. You can catch him frequently on Health Talk Radio, and also visit his informational website, which is www.pathtoradianthealth.com. He also maintains a free informational website, which is propolis.science.org, where he gathered hundreds of studies that explore the use of propolis for health and healing. Help me welcome my guest. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing really well, Jeffrey. It's good to be back.
Thank you so much. Been a while. How's everything in your world?
Yeah, pretty good. We've had I live in Georgia, and we've had for Georgia, a mild spring, which is really nice. I guess I really shouldn't mention that to you being in Vegas, where the heat can be quite intense. But yeah, it's been a really beautiful spring. Things are good. Looks good.
Awesome. You know, I know we're going to talk today about propolis, but, to bring us into the conversation, I think a lot of us understand the importance of pollination and bees in our world. Every once in a while, people are hearing more and more about, devastating things happening to the bee colonies that are out there. I personally am deadly allergic to bees, but at the same time, I respect them, because what they do allows us to be who we are and exist the way we exist and have food supply and things that are all over our planet due to the bees. So talk a little bit about the importance of bees, and maybe we would all get a little bit of a better sense of respect and maybe a better understanding.
Well, they are a key component of our environment. In many ways, you mentioned how significant they are for a number of crops. Some of my favorites: almonds, watermelon, chocolate. I mean, there are a number of foods that we really take for granted that we have to, I guess, give thanks to bees, because they're responsible for pollination in that regard. And unfortunately, they've been under a significant amount of stress the last probably decade or so. And it's a stress not unlike the stress that humans are undergoing. Environmental issues, pollution, stress, the bees that they use in almond fields and the pollination process, they're actually a honeybee that is not native to the U.S. So these bees are transported all over the country in these trucks. You can imagine that's quite stressful. So there's stress elements to it. They're often fed sugar, which is, again, just like humans, not the best food for us to be eating. So there are a number of things that are impacting them. Then you bring in certain viral infection, mite infections, and there's a certain threat to what's called colony collapse disorder, where you have literally tens of thousands, if not millions, of bees dying off. Now, thankfully, that started to improve a little bit of late. But there's another area of bees that I think gets neglected in all this, and that's the native bees. The native bees are dwindling in significant numbers, under threat in a number of ways, and that's because they're losing habitat. Monocultures where people just plant these massive fields of one type of crop, so bees don't have foods and things that are there. Spraying pesticides, weed killer, those types of things are all killing off the native bees. So there are a number of threats for both the kind of imported bees that most of us think of, the honeybee, as well as the domestic bees that are native to this region.
Is there anything we individually could do that could help with the sustainability of bees where we live? I mean, are there things we could plant that would be beneficial to them?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Definitely, planting bee-friendly plants is really important in that regard. And the best way to do that is to find what plants are native to your area. There's a plant called bee balm, which a lot of people plant because they want to feed these bees and things. The problem is bee balm is it's not necessarily a healthy plant for a lot of environments. It's an invasive species in many ways. So the best thing to do would be to go to your plant store, your nursery, and ask them, what plants are native to whatever region you're in that are bee friendly, and then plant them. And then plant them actually in clumps. You want to plant a whole big bunch of them so that when bees come there, there's a whole bunch of food and pollen, source for them. So I think that's one of the biggest things we can do as far as the positive end. On the negative end, we can just stop spraying, stop spraying weed killer, which is disrupts their nervous system. Stop spraying, other synthetic pesticides and things. And also, let your grass grow. Let it grow. Don't rake up your leaves all the time. Mulch if you're going to do that. Because a number of bees and things, as well as a number of other of insects, need that layer kind of under the leaves and things, to grow, to get to the point where they can breed and things. Lightning bugs, which I'm a big fan of. I don't know if I doubt you get them there in Vegas, but in the East Coast, they're a real pleasant spring and summer surprise or gift in many ways. They actually live on the ground for 2 years, and most people don't know that, but they need that cover to do that. So there are some things we can significantly do to impact that process. Also, buy organic.
I was just going to ask that. Okay, thank you. The other thing is, it's when you're kind of feeding and nourishing bees, it's different than having dogs and cats that have a very long life, because the bees don't have a very long life. So we need to be able to have the availability. So in their short life cycle, they're able to get the nutrients they need to do the job that they're meant to do while they're here. True?
Yeah, absolutely. Different bees have different lifespans, but we're really talking, weeks and months, depending on the species and things. So yeah, it's not like you have them around for 10 or 15 years. We don't have that grace. So tending to them every season is an important part of that process.
So when people go to health food stores and really good quality stores that carry, very high quality nutritional products is where I send people today. Everybody's got a good quality health food store near you. Can you talk about the difference between some of the things that we get, maybe we could talk about honey, we could talk about bee pollen, and then propolis. How do they differ? Because they're very similar, obviously, but they're also very different.
Yeah, they're obviously all products of the hive, so to speak. So we have honey, which is the one we're most familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for honey, obviously try to get local honey. Try to get unadulterated honey, which is very, very difficult to do. Those are the keys for honey. Honey is an amazing topical. It does not get nearly enough press and coverage and notoriety for that. I actually formulated a skincare line a number of years ago. We used honey as the main primary ingredient. But I have case studies of individuals who had, massive wounds, from like elbow to wrist that have been, that haven't healed in 10, 15, 20 years. But then when they start applying honey to it, those things heal up in a matter of weeks and months. So honey is an incredible topical in that regard. I think it's a wonderful face mask. You can save some money. You don't have to go out and get these expensive, $40, $50, $100 face masks. Just do a face mask with, honey once a week. Be careful, it does drip, but it's no big threat there. You have pollen, which is, flower pollen, but bee pollen is a little different because it's mixed with the enzymes of the bee. I think that's a legitimate superfood. It's nutritious. It's enzymatically rich. It may help with allergies, I think is really nice. The key for me in pollen is to get a fermented pollen. There's one company in the Midwest, I think it's YSK. That may be, I think that's their name. They make a fermented bee pollen, and the reason I like that is because it's more digestible. Obviously, pollen is kind of waxy, so it's a little more difficult. And then there's royal jelly, which you didn't necessarily mention. That's queen
right.
bee food. That to me is a legitimate longevity aid. I really think it also is a great cosmetic. It gets a little expensive in that regard, but if you're looking for something to really kind of enhance healthy longevity, I think royal jelly is a wonderful gift in that regard, and just so enzymatically rich and energizing. It's just great for the mitochondria. And then there's propolis. The interesting thing about propolis is bees use propolis for a number of different reasons. The word propolis comes from the Greek. Pro means in front of or before, and polis means city or metropolitan. So it basically means in front of the hive. And what they do is they line the entrance of the hive with this propolis, and it acts kind of as a bee wash as they come through. So these bees are coming out from flying around in the world, and they come back into this hive where you have maybe 10, 20,000 bees living in these tiny little spaces. So you can imagine how important it is to keep that hive really, really clean. If someone gets a sniffle in that kind of environment, it's going to wreak havoc. So it cleans the bees as they come in. They use it structurally. They seal up holes. If an invader gets in there, when they kill the invader, they actually wrap it in propolis so it doesn't mold and grow things on it that can be a threat to the hive there. But one of the interesting things about it is we use propolis primarily for its immune benefits, although it's got lots and lots of other benefits that we can talk about. But what is interesting is when the beehive is under threat, when they introduce a pathogen, and they've done studies to confirm this, bees actually seem to know that they need more propolis. So they actually go out and gather a lot more propolis. More bees become gatherers of that propolis. So the bees are aware in many ways that propolis is essential, in a sense, for the immune health of the hive. So it's kind of interesting that we have this wonderful remedy for us, that the bees also recognize that it's very important for them. And again, think about it. You have thousands of bees living in a small space. And you would think, again, these bees living in these small spaces, they'd have strong immune system, but they actually have very, very poor immune systems. And the reason primarily being is they have propolis to save the day.
The interesting thing is, how do they collect the propolis? Does that come from flowers as well?
No, propolis is it's a resin. It's exuded usually from barks or wounds in trees. Like if you've been around pine trees, that sap that kind of creeps out in the bark. If a branch gets injured, you'll see some resin secreted from there. They actually gather that. So there's not, let's say, a lot of it. They will travel pretty far to gather this propolis. What they do, they basically scoop it up with their front legs, push it back to their hind legs. They bring it back to the hive, and there the other bees help kind of unload them. And then they distribute it around the hive, in cracks and in the opening and things.
Bees are amazing creatures. They really, really are. And even though on my side of the coin, being allergic to them and having been allergic to them my whole life, you still have that respect for what they do, because what they do is just amazing.
Yeah, they've gotten a bad rap, I think, because, many of us have been stung by a bee. More times than not, bees will leave you alone, although there is a bee that was imported, I think, from South America that is a little more aggressive. But for the most part, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. And let's be thankful for the work that they do.
It's fun. I have a friend that's a beekeeper, and she lives in Utah, and it is not uncommon for her to see her out with her hives, and the bees are all around her, and she's sitting there in a chair just reading. And I mean, they don't bother her. She has no fear of them. And it's just the most amazing thing, because I'd be like, nope. So it's just amazing, because beekeepers, it's amazing what they do, and they, get the honey and they get the honeycomb. Now, how does honeycomb fit into this?
Yeah, well, honeycomb is in a sense the mainstay of the hive. It's the mass on the inside. These combs are where the bees are basically born, hatched, so to speak. And the honey is there as a food source and everything. So the honeycomb really is a structural element of the interior of the hive.
I was watching a it was probably a PBS special, and they were showing the difference in size of the worker bee and the queen bee, and the size is substantially different.
Yeah, and the lifespan too is significantly different. That a regular bee lives a matter of weeks. The queen bee lives a matter of months and things. So we can maybe attribute the royal jelly to that.
It was, and you learn a lot when you watch these. There was a hive that was, and it was a cluster, a swarm that was at a house, and the lady came over, and she took the hive with her, and she took everything with her to it, and introduced them to a new box, a new hive, and she actually brought her own queen that was in a separate box and put that queen inside there, and they adopted her, she adopted them, and within a couple of days they had a working brand new hive that had been put together. But she actually interjected the queen into that because they need to have someone in charge.
Yeah, I think beekeeping is a really cool process. That you talk about the bringing a new queen in there. You can pick up these mass of bees and literally just pick them up and transport them someplace. And as long as the queen is with that, they will stay and follow it and things. So it's really interesting. Humans have been working with bees for hundreds, if not thousands of years. There is a cave in Spain that hunter-gatherers had, wall paintings of them, of bees and gathering the honey and things. And then, Egyptians have used it. Romans have used it. Greeks have used it. The ancient Chinese used, we've been working with bees for a very long time. And it's interesting when you go back and look at some of the pictures, how they kept their hives back in those days, oftentimes in baskets or in clay pots. Now we use basically wooded slots. But there's some really sophisticated ways for doing it now too as well. So, that whole history and, how that goes about, there's a real kind of science and a real art to it. It's pretty amazing.
Is it true that honey doesn't go bad?
Yeah, it's they've tested honey from I think the Egyptians in the pyramids where they've had jars of it that have been thousands of years old and they're still clean. The reason primarily being is, first of all, it has some compounds in there that are antimicrobial, but it has very, very little water, and for bacteria and fungus and stuff to grow, it needs a certain amount of moisture. So the fact that it is antimicrobial as well as not having any water kind of makes it ideal for kind of a long-lasting compound. It will crystallize over time, but that's fine. It's not an issue.
How would someone decide whether they should use bee pollen or propolis, or both?
Yeah, ideally, use both. Obviously, if you're going to use pollen, you need to be aware of if you have any allergies, seasonal allergies and things. So if you're taking bee pollen from a flower that you're allergic to, you're going to have an allergic reaction to them. So, be aware of that regard. They're very, very different compounds. So to me, it's not like an either or, pollen being, a nutritional supplement in many ways, whereas propolis, I think, is a profound tonic, and then it is an amazing medicinal ally for us. It's one of the most potent antimicrobials out there. It's even been tested against a number of antibiotic resistant and drug resistant compounds, whether they be viruses, bacteria, candida species. So it's incredible in that regard. It has some cardiovascular protection agents to it. It can lower triglycerides, lower cholesterol, lower blood pressure, improve the strength or the function of the arteries, the lining of the arteries, potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective. I mean, there are so many benefits. In fact, I actually made a list earlier when I was getting ready for this. I wish I could show it to you. I probably have 100 different benefits that have been confirmed, by research for benefits that propolis can bring to the table. So what's nice is you can use it preventatively, you can use it therapeutically, you can use it in recovery, and you can use it for a wide range of applications. So, they're so different and their applications are so different. To me, it'd be like saying, should I take vitamin C or take a B complex?
Yeah.
They're both necessary for you or helpful for you.
How about safety issues with propolis? Anybody should not use it?
Well, it depends on the propolis you're using. Propolis, again, coming from the hive, propolis, the majority of propolis is a waxy resin, but about 5% of it is going to be pollen. So if you have allergies or sensitivities to those, those types of pollen, those species, then obviously you may have an allergic reaction to it. Depending on where this pollen is or this propolis is being gathered, if it's in a a bad environment, if there's toxins in the environment, factories and things like that. Um, Bees tend to concentrate that, and they're often used as an environmental health measure. Researchers will go in, look at the hive, they'll test the honey, they'll test the propolis, and they'll look for things like pesticides, heavy metals, those types of things to get a sense of how healthy that environment is. So you need to be careful in that regard. The reason I like a company called Natura Nectar is because they use products come from Brazil in very pristine environments. And then they have a unique extraction process, which allows them to extract out all these wonderful compounds. And there are literally dozens, if not hundreds of active compounds, and it frees them up from the allergens. So if you're using a product like Natura Nectar's different propolises, you don't have to worry about the allergy or the toxins in that regard. So it really depends on what propolis you're using.
How about kids?
Kids have, there are a number of studies showing it to be useful for kids. There was a really good study for kids with asthma showing it decreased severity of the asthma attack, frequency of the asthma attack, particularly nighttime attacks and severity. So there's a cold and flu study suggesting it may be beneficial in that regard. So it does seem to be safe in that sense. And again, not to get back to a company, but Natura Nectar makes a really yummy spray for kids that it's easy to give to them. They'll like the taste of it. You don't have a problem like sometimes you do with getting them to swallow tablets or capsules. But yeah, safe for kids.
I can't handle the pollen, and it just doesn't work well with me because I have allergies, but I can take propolis and I can use honey, which is, I've experimented with them over the years. I can't use a lot of them, but I can use honey without a problem. If I use bee pollen for myself, my throat closes and I have a hard time breathing. I'm just very sensitive to it. But propolis has been very beneficial to me over the years, and I love it.
It's anti-allergenic, so it can actually decrease the breakdown of those mast cells, what are called mast cells. These are cells that are really primarily responsible for all those symptoms that we don't like, with seasonal allergies, the runny, itchy eyes, the runny nose. All those things are responsible because these cells get produced, they break down, and they cause this allergic reaction. Propolis has been shown to stop that process. And it's anti-inflammatory, and many people may not be aware, but an allergic response is an inflammatory response. So it has that kind of two-pronged beneficial aspect in that it can reduce that inflammation, and then it can interfere with the process that causes that allergic response. So it's interesting that people associate bee products with allergies, like you said, but we have propolis being a useful ally for people with allergies.
And to your point before, you were talking about using honey as a healer for the skin. I had a customer of mine many, many years ago, and she was at her ranch in Montana, and they were like 100 miles away from anything. And she had fallen and actually took the meat off of her arm. All the skin, everything was gone. And she had done everything. She tried some colloidal silver. She did, because she was very nutritionally oriented. And she had called her grandmother, who said, put honey on it. So she put honey on it and left it open in the air because she didn't want to, wrap it up. And she said about 3 days later, they were able to get things together and get her down to where the hospital was. And when the doctor looked at it, he said, I don't know what you did, he said, but I can't believe how much healing has happened already in just like 3 days. So, he gave her some stuff for infection because it was a piece of metal, gave her a tetanus shot, things like that. But he told her, he said, I'll give you some salve to use. He goes, but I think if I was you, I'd continue using the honey. He goes, because it is healing dramatically well. And she opened the eyes of this doctor who had heard about it, but never really seen it, actually in real time.
Yeah, I've seen case studies of so many individuals that have had just the wounds like you're talking about, and nothing worked for them. None of the conventional remedies worked for them, and they go on honey and just get profound healing responses. So I don't think there's anything in our natural medicine chest that compares to honey as a topical in that regard.
And I'll also say I've seen it used on animals. I've actually seen it on wounds on horses.
Horses, yep.
Unbelievable. And sometimes they'll wrap it, they will just coat it in honey and then wrap it with a non-sticking kind of pad and then gauze, and then they change it out every couple days. And I've seen it. I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And you kind of wonder why more people have not, maybe they haven't heard about it. But anybody I know that's ever used it, you can't keep them from wanting to talk about it because it's just amazing in front of your eyes.
Yeah, the sad thing is, and I've had experience with this with people who have horses. For some reason, there's at least with a number of them, they think horses can't have honey, applied in this regard. But it's not true. It's again, I've seen a number of cases, you know, as well as you, and it does work wonders.
So another question, we talk about propolis. Is propolis for us as a supplement seasonal, or can we take it every day? And do we have to take breaks on and off? You know, we have things in our industry where they'll say take on and off, you know, have a break in between. Can we use it continuously?
Yeah, I don't see any evidence suggests why we can't use it continuously. I've been using it now for years. When you look at the range of benefits, you know, let's just talk about, you know, immune. It's a preventative for immune, so you don't get sick. So you don't want to wait around and, you know, to get that cold or flu or, you know, more serious viral or bacterial infection. So, you know, it's preventative in that regard. Same thing with cardiovascular. You know, it helps keep and maintain the cardiovascular health. It can help chelate heavy metals out of the body. And unfortunately, no matter how cleanly you live, we're all getting heavy metals. They're just unavoidable nowadays. So, you know, mercury, cadmium, you know, a number of these things which are difficult to avoid now. It can help remove those from the body. It's protective for the liver. It's protective for the kidneys. There are respiratory benefits to it. You know, it kills off any of these microbes that we may be, you know, confronted with in that regard. So I think using it as a regular supplement really makes sense. Just the fact that it's a potent antioxidant, the fact that it's a potent anti-inflammatory, and it's what I call a layered anti-inflammatory. It inhibits COX-1, it inhibits COX-2, inhibits interleukin, it inhibits the production of prostaglandins, blocks leukotrienes. You don't need to get into the chemistry of that, but these are all compounds that are essential for the inflammatory process in the body. We know inflammation is a contributor or the contributor for all chronic diseases. And again, the best way to, you know, take care of these things is, you know, don't let that inflammation build up in the body. You know, you can think of inflammation as heat. You know, a slight warm, you know, touch on the arm or hand is not bad, but when it gets really, really hot, you know, it burns, and the same thing happens internally. So if we let that inflammation build up, we have more severe consequences to pay. So taking these anti-inflammatories like turmeric, hops is another one of my favorites, propolis, particularly red propolis as anti-inflammatories. I think those are just key for just health maintenance, let alone vitality and longevity as well.
Would you consider propolis to be a food, an herb, a nutrient, a supplement? And when is the best time to take it?
Yeah, that's difficult. Kind of, I wouldn't consider it a food because it's a very waxy compound. I know some people try to eat it, and it ends up just sticking into, like, you know, cracks and crevices in your teeth, and you can't access it because it is so waxy. So it really needs to be extracted. So whatever propolis you do use, make sure it is extracted if you really want to get those benefits from it in that regard. Yeah, I would consider it a supplement. I would consider it a tonic, and I consider it a therapeutic aid, depending again on how you're using it and how much you're taking. So I think it fills a couple of categories in that regard.
With food, without food?
Ideally, I would take it without food just because you don't want to dilute it. And I think that's the case for a lot of things aside from vitamins, which need food compounds, you know, to be maximized their assimilation in the body. So it's just simply, you know, take it so it doesn't get lost in the salad or the burger or whatever it is you're eating at the time. So ideally take it, you know, on an empty stomach. Depending on what you're using it for, that would, to me, to some degree, determine, you know, when you should take it. If you're using it primarily just kind of as an immune tonic, I like to take immune tonics before bed. The reason being is our immune system really does a lot of its work, a lot of its catch up overnight. So if you're going to take an immune tonic like astragalus or mushrooms, which you and I have talked about a lot, or if you're going to use propolis as kind of that immune tonic, I would take it before bed. If you're using it more therapeutically or, you know, in acute cases, then I would take it at least 2 to 3 times a day, you know, again, away from food.
What has always interested me, and you and I have both been around a long time, 4 decades and longer, and how things are used and revered, and just they're not even thought of as anything but the norm all over the world. And all of a sudden something comes here and it's like it's brand new and it's been utilized throughout history for 1,000 years or more. Propolis around the world now. Any parts of the world that not only revere it, but maybe it's just commonly recommended?
Yeah, Eastern Europe is probably one of those areas. There's that kind of that family tradition. Same thing with mushrooms in that category. They're used to using a lot of these natural remedies. And so many people I've met from who are now second or third generation from Eastern Europe, they all talk about going out with their grandmother to gather herbs, to gather mushrooms. They kept bees and things. It used to be quite common that people would keep bees. So it's only really here in the States that we've kind of become a little bee phobic, so to speak. So yeah, they've been used for, Roman legionnaires used to carry propolis in their first aid kits. That's how long we've known about, its wound healing capabilities in that regard. The Chinese used it for infections. Persians used it. The Incas used it for fevers. Native Americans used it. So, we do have a really long history of a number of cultures using it. And it's still in areas where they're a little less caught up in the modern era of things, that they still will keep bees, they'll still gather the herbs or grow their own herbs. I think things that we all should be doing. If you have a chance, if you have a yard, plant some echinacea, plant some chamomile, heck, plant some peppermint. It's so easy to grow. These are all wonderful medicines, and some of them taste real good, like peppermint.
It's funny. Our industry is kind of like a double-edged sword. We're pursuing and constantly trying to redevelop and utilize science to find things that are more absorbable, more digestible, or more bioavailable. And we're continually going back, which is wonderful, recreating and learning and applying new things and new discoveries. But along the way, while we're doing this, we sometimes have a tendency to forget the things that have been around for a long time. And they get out of view, things like propolis. My goodness, and you can't think anything about anything today without also looking back in time, because some of these things are the things that opened up our minds to looking for new things today. But we sometimes forget things that have been around for a long time.
Yeah, one of the critiques I have of the natural products or natural healing communities is we tend to be pretty trendy in that regard.
Yeah.
Something will come along and it's super hot for 2, maybe 3 years. St. John's wort, 20 years ago, had its heyday for a few years, even though it's a wonderful remedy, then starts to fade. Collagen now seems to be, was it last couple years, one of the hot ingredients and things. And it's nice that we're exploring new things, getting more refined in some areas. But it's that idea, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some of these natural remedies that we've used a long time, in their cruder forms, often tend to be the best way to use them. The propolis is an example. There are a number of compounds, probably hundreds of active compounds in the propolis. There's one called CAPE, caffeic acid phenyl ethyl ester, if I pronounce that right. The pharmaceutical industry sees that, and they just want to isolate the CAPE and give it to people in concentrated form, which has some amazing benefits, particularly as it relates to cancer. But then when they go out and they actually look at the studies and the research, hey, guess what? It's the range of compounds. It's those synergy of compounds that have these benefits, particularly for the immune system, particularly as an anti-cancer ally. So, we can sometimes refine away some of the good stuff. And I do think we need to honor these traditions that have used, these remedies for hundreds of years. I mean, again, think about it. 400 years ago, they couldn't walk down to the local health food store and pick up a bottle of propolis extract.
Sure.
They had to stick their hand in a beehive with the threat of the bees there. It's difficult to scrape that out and process it and things. And the fact that they kept doing it, I think really speaks to the healing gift that a lot of these, for lack of a better phrase, ancient remedies have to offer. A lot of these Chinese herbs, medicinal mushrooms, They've been around a long time and honored and appreciated for a very long time. And they really wouldn't have been around a long time or appreciated for such a long time if they weren't beneficial, I think, in my opinion.
Well, no, I appreciate this. This is really good. This is a lot of really good clarity. And, you and I have never gone down this road before. So this is really, really interesting. I do appreciate it. I thank you so much for being here today, and keep up the good work, because, you're an amazing asset to this industry, Mark.
Always a pleasure talking with you. You know that. And, I wish you the best with, this new avenue with podcasting. So best of luck with that.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for being here today. Remember, this is the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. I am your host. Tell your friends. Go to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com. They can click on the Honest Health logo. It'll take them right to Spotify for the audio versions. They can also click on the YouTube icon, and that'll take them to the YouTube, and then you can watch the actual interview at the YouTube channel as well. drjeffreyburke.com. Send your friends, send your family. Remember, we're paying it forward. We want to make sure that everybody around us has the tools they need to make the best decisions possible. I'm going to bring you the best of the best guests here to bring you the most effective and honest information so that you can make those really detailed informational decisions, which is really important. Remember, when you're there on either YouTube or Spotify, click like. This is all new to me. So if it says click it and like it, do it, please. We want to make sure that we get visible and that people are out there learning from all of this great information that we're putting by. So I thank you once again for being here. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the show today. Mark, before we go, I'd love for you to leave everybody with a thought of the day.
Yeah, well, since we're on the topic of bees, there's a kind of a lesson that I think bees have to teach us. There was a study that was done a few years ago where they went into a beehive and they removed all the younger bees. So the hive was just left with all these older bees. And what they found is that these older bees, in a sense, got rejuvenated. They started taking care of the young. They started going out and gathering the pollen and the propolis. And there was that rejuvenation process. And I think it really speaks to the importance of having purpose in our life and how powerful an ally it is for our health, our vitality, and our longevity. And I think the bees are just a good example, kind of proving that point.
I love it. Thank you to my guest, Mark Kaylor. Thank you, everybody that's here today. Have a great day, and God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.